You have the worst toothache of your life. You're in so much pain you can barely think. So you go to the medieval doctor for help. But instead of giving you medicine, he takes out a red-hot needle and starts poking it into your tooth. Why? Because he thinks there are tiny worms living inside your teeth, eating them from the inside out. Today we'll discuss into one of the most terrifying medieval medical beliefs that will make you so grateful you live in 2025. We're talking about the medieval tooth worm theory. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never complain about going to the dentist again. But before we get into the really scary stuff, if you love learning about creepy historical facts like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales from the past. And stick around until the end, because I'm going to tell you about the most extreme tooth worm removal method that involved, well, let's just say it involved fire. Alright, let's jump back in time to when people thought worms lived in their teeth. So here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. For over 4,000 years, people across different civilizations, from ancient Babylon to medieval Europe, genuinely believed that tooth pain was caused by tiny worms living inside your teeth. This wasn't just some random crazy person's idea. This was official medical knowledge taught in medical schools. Doctors, scholars, even really smart people all believed that these microscopic creatures were literally eating holes in people's teeth from the inside. The medieval tooth worm theory said that these little parasites would burrow into your teeth, like termites in wood. They thought the worms would munch away at your tooth, creating cavities, and the waste they left behind caused all that horrible pain and infection. And get this, they even had a whole explanation for how the worms got there. They believed that if you ate too many sweets, or if you didn't clean your mouth properly, it would create the perfect environment for these tooth worms to grow and multiply. Kind of like how we know bacteria actually works today, except they thought it was actual worms. Medieval medical texts described these tooth worms as being so small you could barely see them, but they were supposedly shaped like tiny snakes or maggots. Some doctors even claimed they could see them moving around in people's mouths with magnifying glasses. The craziest part? Sometimes people would actually report seeing these worms. Of course, what they were probably seeing were just bits of food, pus, or decayed tooth material. But back then, they were convinced it was proof that the worm theory was totally correct. Can you imagine living in a time when everyone, including the smartest doctors, believed that tiny creatures were literally living in your mouth, eating your teeth? It sounds like something out of a horror movie, but this was everyday medical knowledge for medieval people. Now here's where things get really terrifying, because if you believed worms were eating your teeth, you had to find a way to kill them or get them out, right? And medieval doctors had some absolutely horrifying methods to do exactly that. The most common tooth worm removal technique involved taking a needle or thin piece of metal, heating it up until it was red hot, and then jamming it directly into the painful tooth. The idea was that the heat would either kill the worm instantly or make it so uncomfortable that it would crawl out on its own. Just think about it, the screaming. Remember, they had NO anesthesia, NO pain medication, nothing to make this bearable. People would have to be held down while a doctor literally burned the inside of their tooth with a red-hot piece of metal. But wait, it gets worse. Some medieval dentists thought the best way to kill tooth worms was to smoke them out. They would make patients inhale smoke from burning herbs, or even worse, they would blow smoke directly into the painful tooth through a tube or pipe. They used all kinds of crazy things for the smoke, burning animal fat, special herbs, even human hair. The theory was that the smoke would suffocate the worms or make them so sick they die or leave on their own. This one is absolutely insane. Some doctors would make a mixture of animal fat and various herbs, set it on fire, and then have the patient put their mouth directly over the burning mixture to inhale the fumes. People would literally be breathing in toxic smoke, thinking it was medicine. Some medieval dentists claimed they could actually pull the tooth worms out. They would use tiny tweezers, or even just their fingernails, to try to grab what they thought were worms inside people's teeth. Of course, they were probably just pulling out bits of decayed food or infected tissue, but patients would see these gross chunks coming out of their mouths and think, "Wow, the doctor really did pull out the worms." And if heating, smoking, and pulling didn't work, some doctors would try to poison the tooth worms. They would put drops of various toxic substances directly onto the painful tooth, hoping to kill whatever was living inside. These medicines included things like mercury, arsenic, and other incredibly dangerous chemicals that probably made people way sicker than their original toothache ever did. The worst part about all of these treatments, sometimes they actually seemed to work, but not because they killed any worms, usually because they damaged the tooth nerves so badly that people couldn't feel pain anymore, or because the toxic treatments killed the bacteria that were actually causing the infection. Now you're probably wondering, if there were never any tooth worms, why did people think these crazy treatments actually worked sometimes? Well, here's the thing that medieval people didn't understand. Tooth pain is usually caused by bacteria, not worms. When you have a cavity or an infected tooth, it's because harmful bacteria are eating away at your tooth enamel and creating acid that dissolves your teeth. So, when medieval doctors used their hot needles and burning treatments, they were accidentally killing some of these bacteria. The heat would actually sterilize parts of the infected area, which sometimes did reduce pain and infection, just not for the reasons they thought. Plus, a lot of times the treatments were so traumatic that they would destroy the tooth's nerve completely. Once the nerve was dead, the person wouldn't feel pain anymore, so they thought they were cured, even though their tooth was actually way more damaged than before. And here's something really interesting. Some of the herbs they used in their smoke treatments actually did have natural antibiotic properties. Things like cloves, garlic, and certain tree barks can help fight bacterial infections. So occasionally, people really would feel better after treatment, which just convinced everyone that the tooth worm theory was correct. But here's what's really crazy. Even when these treatments didn't work, people still believed in the tooth worm theory. If someone's pain got worse or they got sicker, doctors would just say, "Well, the worms must be really strong," or "We need to try an even more powerful treatment." It's kind of sad when you think about it. People were suffering through these horrible, torturous procedures because they genuinely believed it was the only way to get better. And doctors were trying their best to help. They just had completely wrong information about what was actually causing the problem. Alright, now let me tell you about some of the most extreme and absolutely insane tooth worm removal cases that were actually recorded in medieval medical books. Remember how I promised to tell you about the treatment that involved fire? Well, here it is. Some medieval doctors believed that the only way to kill really stubborn tooth worms was to literally set the person's mouth on fire. They would soak a piece of cloth in alcohol or oil, light it on fire, and then quickly stick it into the patient's mouth near the painful tooth. The idea was that the sudden burst of intense heat would shock the worms to death instantly. Can you even imagine agreeing to let someone put fire in your mouth to cure a toothache? But people were so desperate for pain relief that they would try anything. There was this one medieval dentist who claimed he could see tooth worms better than anyone else, and he supposedly pulled over 200 worms out of people's teeth in just 1 year. He would charge people extra money for each worm he removed, and he became super famous for his tooth worm extraction skills. Of course, he was probably just pulling out bits of food and infected tissue, but people came from all over the region to have him deworm their teeth. Even kings and queens believed in tooth worms. There are records of royal physicians treating members of royal families with hot needle therapy and smoke treatments for their tooth worm infestations. One particular queen supposedly had her court physician perform the fire treatment on her, and when she felt better afterward, she declared that tooth worm removal should be the official dental treatment for her entire kingdom. There was this guy who traveled from town to town with a special cart full of hot needles, smoking herbs, and magnifying glasses. He claimed he was the best tooth worm remover in all of Europe. He would set up in the town square, and people would line up to have him burn their teeth with hot metal. He made so much money from this that he could afford fancy clothes and a horse-drawn carriage, all from torturing people's teeth. Some medieval doctors believed that really bad toothaches were caused by multiple worms working together, so they would perform several different treatments in a row. First the hot needle, then the smoke, then trying to pull out the worms, all on the same poor patient. Imagine going through 3 different torture sessions in one day, all because someone thought a team of tiny worms was having a party inside your tooth. So there you have it, the absolutely terrifying world of medieval tooth worm removal. Can you imagine living in a time when going to the dentist meant having someone stick red-hot needles in your mouth or literally set your teeth on fire? The craziest part is that people genuinely believed this was good medicine. Doctors thought they were saving lives by burning out these imaginary tooth worms, and patients were grateful for treatments that we now know were basically medieval torture. It just goes to show how much medical knowledge has advanced over the centuries. Today we know that tooth pain is caused by bacteria, cavities, and infections, not tiny worms eating our teeth from the inside. And thank goodness we have actual anesthesia, antibiotics, and real dentistry instead of hot needles and mouth fires. So the next time you complain about going to the dentist for a cleaning or a filling, just remember, at least your dentist isn't trying to burn imaginary worms out of your teeth with red-hot metal. If you enjoyed learning about this terrifying piece of medical history, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more creepy historical content. Drop a comment below and let me know, would you rather have a modern root canal, or would you be brave enough to try medieval tooth worm removal? I think I know what most of you will choose. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next terrifyingly educational video.